All right, everyone, let's get started. So welcome to the first of the Dutchess County Sheep and Wool Growers Association seminar. This one is our first one of the year, and it's an introduction to wool. So it gives you a little bit more insight into a couple of the different aspects of sheep and wool keeping. Obviously, there's more than we can discuss in this time period, but again, it gives a taste of things, and hopefully we'll let you make some better decisions when buying wool or making products or whatnot. We've got three speakers for tonight. We've got Jeri Robinson-Lawrence, we got Bruce McCord and Marie-Paul Rossier. Each speaker will chat for about 20 minutes, and then there will be a about 10-minute Q&A / break for everybody, so you can get up, stretch your legs. Questions, please put in the chat box. So hover over your menu that's got your mute and video stuff, and there's a little chat option there. And you can type a question in there or just say, hey, I have a question. And then we can unmute you just so it's not mass chaos when people have questions. So again, that'll be a break around 6:30, a break around 7. So again, this is brought to you by the Dutchess County Sheep and Wool Growers Association. This is an organization that is open to everybody. We are not just Dutchess County residents. So if you're in the area, if you're in the country, if you're in the world, you're allowed. So please check out that website and think about joining us, joining the network of sheep-minded people. We've got folks who have sheep, folk who don't have sheep, all aspects of sheep and wool growers, including camel-led folks. So our first speaker tonight is Jeri Robinson-Lawrence. She's a professor of art and design at Millersville University in Pennsylvania. She's also the co-owner, along with her daughter, of Flying Fibers, a full-service fiber arts shop located at their farm in Wrightsville, PA. Her own flock of rare breed sheep includes the North American Wensleydale, Leicester Longwools, and Shetland breeds. And you may have met her if you've been to the New York State Sheep and Wool Festival. She's often in the breed barn showing off her favorite breeds. And tonight, Jeri will describe the differences between a variety of wool sheep, from sort of rare to more commercial breeds, so that you can consider which breed when you're buying sheep and get one that best meets your needs. So I will turn it over to Jeri.
Thank you very much. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here for you. Thank you so much for coming. I really appreciate you spending your Saturday evening with me. As Jillian said, I do have several breeds of sheep, and I started out with the Longwools, so that's primarily what you're seeing here, and what I'm probably most known for are the Wensleydale sheep, and they are a Longwool out of Britain. We have to call them North American Wensleydales, and they come in either white or black, and you can see them with the bluer face. The girl on the right, I believe she's on your right, is a Leicester Longwool. Those are my daughters. And so there's a mix of them all in here. And there's one little Teeswater that I dabbled with, but just for a short time. Can everybody see the screen okay? It's the right size? Okay. So the first thing I would ask you to consider is, what do you want to do with your sheep and with wool before you decide what breed you should get? So are you going to use it for the fiber arts? And that's primarily what we're focusing on tonight. Do you want meat sheep? I'm not your gal because I don't know anything about meat sheep. Or do you want them to breed and sell? For me, I do some breeding, but I'm not very good at letting them go. So they tend to stay with me. So I'm not a prolific breeder. I focus more on the fiber arts. And I don't ignore that livestock conservancy for just now. So the first thing that you have to be aware of when you're going to decide what kind of sheep you want to bring in to your farm, or even if you are just buying wool, again, is what do you want it for? So there's something called a micron count. And a micron count is a measurement of the individual. Feel free to take screenshots as well if you need to, but and because those will be cleaner. I see somebody getting a phone out. A screenshot will be cleaner and easier to read. The micron count is like if we take an individual piece of our own hair, we could take an individual piece of wool and actually measure the thickness of it. That is what determines the thickness or thinness, is what determines the softness. But that's not always the only thing that determines it. Micron count is number one. And you'll notice here that if you're considering next to skin soft, then you would want a lower number micron. And here they're saying 14.5. I've never seen anything in that range. Maybe that's where camelids fall, but for sheep, the finest I've seen is an 18.5 and 19.5, and that's merino, which most people are familiar with. There are other sheep that fall in that same category. They're just not as popular, and I'll talk about some of those as I go. I could talk for hours about sheep, so I'm probably going to race through this and then back up and answer some of your questions if you have them. So you see the 16, from the 14 to 16, most sheep that we're having don't have that. So I can have a merino that doesn't have it either. And that's because nutrition plays a part in it. How good your pasture is, how good their health is, will all play a part in the quality of the wool that you're getting off a sheep. So merino sheep is considered the finest wool. It's used for high quality soft garments, and leading fashion designers will routinely use that. But they're also starting to branch out, fashion designers, and use a variety of different wools. Then you have the medium range. Your typical sweater at the store is often, when it just says 100% wool, is your typical medium range. And many different breeds fall in this category. Often they can be considered both wool and for meat, hence dual purpose. And then you have the 26 to 32 and 32 to 48. And I'm laughing because that's what my long wools, that's the category they fall into. And I would never use my Wensleydale or even my Leicester Longwool for carpets and rugs, although that's what the micron count suggests. So there are different things that will impact this. So a merino sheep is a rather short wool, growing about 5 inches in a year. My long wools, the Wensleydale in particular, can grow up to 14 inches, 10 to 14 inches in a year. So yes, the follicle is thicker, the individual piece of wool, but you don't have to put a lot of twist into it. And so because of the length to hold it together, so a merino, if spun wrong, can feel terrible. Oftentimes people think the long wools are terrible because they've been spun wrong. They've been spun super tight together like a merino is, and then they feel like a Brillo pad. But I would never use it for carpet. It's a very silky fiber. And again, here is your range. The fine in the 18 to 24, medium, 25 to 32, coarse 33 to 40. And then there's also specialty, also called rare or heritage breeds. And those breeds often don't fall into these categories just because they're sort of singled out. And that's where my Shetlands actually fall into the rare and the heritage. So those micron counts are where they fit those specific breeds. And notice it's a unit of measure that's equal to 1/1,000,000th of a meter. So it's very, very fine. So the numbers, you may think that from 18 to 32 is significant, but when it's only 1/1,000,000th, it's really not that difference. And as I noted, there are other reasons where the wool might not feel so soft. So I've noticed when I breed, if a pregnant ewe is not going to give me as nice a wool as a wether whose only job is to grow his wool for me. So with the next to skin softs, everybody knows merino, so I'm focusing on some others. Some others that you will see are the Rommeldale CVM, and these are both considered rare breed in this country. I tend to focus on the rare breeds because my whole thing is preservation through education. So I'll focus more on these than the commercial breeds, but there are a lot of, we're only touching upon breeds that are available. So the Rommeldale CVM is soft enough for that next to skin wear with a micron count of 20 to 25. And what's fabulous about them too, is that they come in a variety of colors. So that's always exciting. And they're always, a lot of the breeds I'm showing you are in the breed barn display at the New York State Sheep and Wool Festival. So if you're interested, I would suggest that you come and look at the sheep and talk to the breeders and actually learn from them, get your hands on the sheep and talk about what your goals are and what it is you want to do. Here are the three girls, the three Shetlands that I started with. So I'll tell you, figure out what you want first. I fell in love with a knitted cardigan. That's what started the whole Wensleydale thing for me. I'd never seen anything like this wool. It was shiny, like there was silk in it, and there isn't. And it also had a halo and it drapes. It's a very heavy fiber, which just stood out to me. So I knew nothing about sheep. I'm a city kid from Buffalo, New York. And so I just thought I'd put one in my suitcase and bring it home from England. Doesn't work that way. So it took quite some years, but I think I've had Wensleydale North American. We have to say North American here because they are different than the English, for about 15 years. But the Shetlands, this little girl in front, these are her babies. She has mini versions of herself when she has girls. They are Shetland sheep, and they are considered a primitive or an unimproved sheep. And they have a fiber has diverse properties, which is really interesting because it can be a longer, coarser fiber, or it can be downy soft. It's really interesting because it's on the same sheep too. You can get different variations. But that little girl in the front walked through a whole pasture of sheep and walked through a lot of people and put her head on my shoulder. So I didn't intend to get Shetlands, but that's how that started. And my dirty little secret is I now have more Shetlands than I have of the Wensleydales, because one of the other things you want to consider, aside from their wool, is how are you going to care for them? They're very small, they're hardy, they thrive. If I just go back a moment to why they're considered primitive or unimproved, what that means is that people left them alone. They're the same now as they were thousands of years ago. In America, we tend to supersize everything. We didn't get our hands on that and on the Shetland. And it could be because they're a relatively small sheep. The rare breeds take up to 3 years to grow to full size. So they're often not considered desirable for the meat market. Shorter and thicker fiber. It's not itchy. I love to argue with people over itch. Wool is not itchy. It has different purposes. So if you're wearing one that's truly itchy, it's because it's not meant to be next to your skin. It may be intended for insulation or carpeting, or it's a byproduct of the meat industry. And if all their energy is going into growing for meat, the wool isn't going to be as nice. So some of the shorter, thicker fibers that you would be familiar with are in the 25 to 32 micron range. That would be Jacob sheep, your spotted sheep, known as far back as in the Bible. Another one is the Southdown sheep. And again, there are hundreds of sheep, so I'm really just touching on a few. Here is another list of several sheep that are available in this country that are in that shorter and thicker range. And I tend again to focus a lot on the rare breeds because that's my thing. So if you want to screenshot that, feel free. And you see that the micron count, even within an individual sheep, can change dramatically. One of the other things when you're thinking about what you want and what you want your wool for is how much wool can you get off of a particular sheep. So I love blue-faced Leicesters, but they don't give you a lot of wool in a year, whereas my Wensleydales can give me anywhere from 5 to 15 pounds. And then it goes further. So because we have a store, we really want a lot of wool. But now I'll say that they also go from 250 to 350 pounds. So if you are concerned about handling a large sheep, they wouldn't be the sheep for you. So a couple here are, so notice it says coarse, but a lot of people will argue the notion of coarse. It's really, what are you using it for? How are you spinning it? Doll makers love it. It's perfect doll hair, all of these long wools. It's also good for lock spinning and tail spinning and the art yarns. So there's a lot that you can do with the long wools. If you want it next to skin soft on your neck, it's probably not the one. I wear my long wools always against my skin and it doesn't bother me, but we go to great lengths to work with the mill to spin them. Not all mills, if you want it to be commercially processing wool, not all mills can handle a long length. You have to find one that knows how to work with it. Their equipment's not long enough. So the Leicester Longwool is a sheep that was originally, Colonial Williamsburg reintroduced them to America. Thomas Jefferson, George Washington, folks like that had the Leicester. And the Leicester is a significant animal in the sheep world because of a fellow named Robert Bakewell, and he sort of established different breeds in England and helped us to work with them. Now you'll notice here, we say it's a heavy, curly, soft handling and lustrous with a spiral tipped staple, which is your length, but 32 to 38 microns suggested that it can only be used for carpets and rugs. And that's just simply not the case. And so you have to talk to people, you have to sit with your sheep. The Lincoln Longwool, which Lincolns are really quite popular, their count is the highest of the Longwools at 38 to 40. Cotswolds, here are some more that fall in that category. There's the Black Welsh Mountain, the Cotswold, the Lincoln, as we talked about, and Oxford, and a Teeswater. So the Wensleydales and the Teeswaters are very difficult to distinguish between. I would chance to guess that nobody could tell the difference even under a microscope. They're considered the finest of the Leicester Longwools, meaning the thinnest of that category. They're not thin, not at all. But you see, what do you like the looks of? Oops, sorry about that. There we go. This, if you feel free to take a screenshot of this, because this will put sheep into categories for you, sheep that I didn't touch on because 20 minutes is a short amount of time. There are the fines, the mediums, the longs, which I talked about. Then there are sheep known to be dual purpose. Not all sheep that are dual purpose are in these categories, so it's a snapshot. Then there's something called a hair sheep. It is more like hair, so if you want to spin, this is not where I'd go. And then the specialties, notice they even call them carpets. Now, Herdwick, some of these truly are, thankfully, Wensleydale and the other Longwools aren't listed in here, but Herdwick was, oh, I just lost her name. She wrote all the books in England. Somebody else will get her name. Everybody, we all know her. She loved the Herdwicks, and they actually are used for carpets and for insulation in England. Then there's sheep that are colored that are listed here, and double coated or primitive means that they have a stiff fiber and then a smoother fiber undercoat. Shetland breeders will argue that they don't really fall into that category. There are some double coated, but not always. And then please grab a screenshot of this for additional information and resources. It took me years until I actually had my first sheep, and I boarded them for years and then bought land and visited daily. And I only got to live on my own farm at the age of 57. So you're never too late to achieve the dream. But the first place I would recommend that you look is for breed associations. So if there's every shepherd loves to talk about their sheep and will happily talk about their sheep for hours on end. So if you're interested in the look of something or something on that list struck your fancy, go on to these breed associations. You don't have to join them to look at the websites. If you want further information on who's breeding, you may have to go in and actually join, but there's a ton of information on Facebook and Instagram. Visit sheep farms. We actually have our store. We moved it to the farm because our goal is preservation through education. So I talk sheep all the time. My daughter tends to run our little shop, but I just love to talk about the sheep, and people will come over and say, how do I start? And I'm more than happy to work with them on that. And I'm not alone in doing that. There are several universities that have extensive information available for you. So there's an article on Oklahoma State University's website on starting a sheep enterprise. It's a short little article worth reading. They also have an extensive listing of sheep breeds and what they're good for. I tend to refer to this quite often when I want to know something about sheep or I need information about a specific sheep. And that's also where I refer people to. Cornell has a blog, and I'm sorry to say this if there's Cornell fans, it's really difficult to navigate the site, but Oklahoma State's is very good. And then the University of Maryland sheep and goat page has worthwhile informational links, and they cover things like FAMACHA, which is a way to assess the health of your animal. And they have some other different links in there that are worthwhile. The Livestock Conservancy is the American organization that lists rare breed sheep. You won't see all rare breeds on there. It's kind of funny. They focus on the breeds that existed within America or that are important to the survival of that animal in other parts of the world. So the Teeswater is on there, but the Wensleydale is not. And there's reasons for all these things. But and then the Rare Breed Survival Trust is the British equivalent. So both associations talk about the differences in the breeds, the importance of preserving them. And they also have different categories of where animals fall within those lists, whether they are critically at risk in terms of their survival or whether they're recovering. So for instance, the Shetland is not on the British list, but it's on the American list and it's now recovering. We've done a really good job with the Shetlands. The other good place to visit is the Breed Barn at the Sheep and Wool Festival, because it's full. I think I have 21 different breeds represented there each year. And in addition to just talking to the shepherds one-on-one, many of the shepherds actually give a lecture for the public so that you can learn about different things there. That's my 20 minutes, I believe. So there's Dot in the front there. She's the one who put her head on my shoulder, and that was it. Shetlands for me. They're also a thrifty breed that survives in a harsh environment. And for us, harsh is hot and humid. I'm in Pennsylvania, so a bit different than up where you are. So feel free to contact me, Jeri at flyingfibers.com. I'm Flying Fibers Jeri on Instagram, and mostly there is just pictures of the animals. That's it, the store is just flying fibers. So that's me. So thank you very much for listening. Jillian, are there questions for later or now?
Well, we had an answer to one of your, the Beatrix Potter, Mrs. William
Oh,
Keelis.
thank you. How could I forget that? I could even see the books and couldn't get her name.
So thank you so much. That was obviously a lot of information to go over, but that was a great overview. So we've got a little break / question and answer period for the next 5 or 10 minutes. Again, use that chat box to say you have a question or type it in there, and we can, ask any questions. Otherwise.
Now I'll get really nervous because I see Deborah Robeson is here. I know nothing compared to her.
So there's a question, Jeri. Do you shear the Longwools once or twice a year?
I'm going to throw a wrench in that. Every 7 to 8 weeks. So months, 7 to 8 months. We have done 6 months, and it's just a little too short for my liking. So 7 to 8 months works better. This year, I'm going to try. So I just saw another question come in. This year, it's going to be about 10 months. The last time when I tried to do a full year, so in England, they will do up to, they call it a shearling. They'll go up to about, so if the ewe was born in March or ram, they'll wait till not the following March, but that following fall. So 16, 18 months, and they can have up to like 18 inches. They're spectacular, but it's really hot and humid here. So when I tried to go a year, my best fleece, my best ewe for production, it was almost all felted at the base, and it was nasty. So I do shear twice, but then I have to watch the weather because it's not a nice, neat and tidy spring fall. So, and the Shetlands, they can roo. So this is the first year I've ever had any roo, which means, and that's ROO. It means that the wool actually sort of sheds, not that simple. It kind of comes off as a sheet. I kind of roll it off. It's really wild. So they're doing it themselves. There's the different kinds of Shetlands. So I have I always forget if it's 1927 or 28, but there's a specific year Shetland that some people really like. It's shorter. It's super, super soft. 1927. Thank you, Deb. That I tend to have to leave them, or it's not long enough for a mill to deal with. So they'll go a year. And then some of my longer Shetlands, it's kind of by the animal. Isn't that weird to say? Some of the Shetlands with the longer wool, the spring summer fleece. So I'll shear in the spring, and then I get the spectacular fleece by October, and I'll shear. And then what they give me through winter is kind of crummy. So I use it for erosion control on the farm. So we compost it essentially and put it in places that are damp and wet because it's not very nice. So it's all over the place. What are the hair types used for? That's a really good question. And because I've never had any interest in them, I'm not sure I can answer that. I keep looking at Deb. Meat. Okay, meat. Deb says meat. Is there a way to coordinate a shearing schedule with ruing? Oh, no, if you shear after ruing, you're going to have little breaks and double cuts. So you would want, you either know that that animal rues and you want to take it off yourself. You don't want to go ahead and shear them. Because this is my first year having ruing, it's kind of new to me. I was like, oh my goodness, what's happening? So I had these 2 little ones sheared, and then the little bit that started to grow started ruing, and I was kind of a shock. So I'll know more in the near future. The other thing I love about the Shetlands, I said they're like potato chips. They come in 11 colors and 33 different patterns. So you can get all kinds of natural shades from the Shetlands. Last year we had, and if you look out into my pasture, it doesn't look like there are too many different colors. You see a lot of beige, and then you can see some blacks and some fawns, but we had 7 different colors come back from the mill because their undercoat was darker or a different color than the tips, which is kind of normal.
All right, any last questions? Mill, which mill do you use?
I use Blue Mountain Farm. There are good mills all over the country. And again, you would want to look for a mill who can work with your particular fiber. So Blue Mountain Family Farm and Mill is in Dauphin County, Pennsylvania. They're a mother-daughter team who we worked alongside each other in 4-H for years, and they also raised long wools. So they have the equipment that will handle a long wool, and they know how to spin it to make it feel good. So, and they can do the Shetlands just fine. So that's the mill I use for the most part. But you've got a lot of mills around you too, like Battenkill is a good mill, and Green Mountain. There's a lot in New York State.
All right, well, thank you very much, Jeri. I really appreciate it. And hopefully you'll stick around for the rest of the evening. And again, we've got contact details. I have some details at the end. So if you didn't get to ask your questions, just contact us after the lecture and we can put you all in contact. So thanks again, Jeri.
Thank you very much. And thanks everyone for coming. Now I'm looking forward to hearing the rest.
All right. So our next speaker is Bruce McCord. Who will be talking about shearing. So Bruce has been raising and shearing sheep in the Hudson Valley since 1980. And although he has recently retired from shearing, so I'm sorry, he can't shear your sheep, he still stays active in the sheep community. And in addition to raising commercial crossbred sheep, he and his family breed and show purebred Southdowns. And they travel to numerous shows across the Northeast each year. So Bruce will be chatting about some important aspects of shearing with a great perspective because he is a shearer himself, and some pointers on how we can improve our relationship with our shearer and work there. So let me find you and unmute you, Bruce. So you can actually unmute yourself, hopefully. So click your little, perfect.
Okay, how we sound, Jillian?
Perfect, Bruce, thank you.
Okay. All right. Jillian, can you put my picture up, please?
You can hit the share screen button. It's one of the menu ones.
Yes, okay.
And that should show what's on your screen. Perfect.
No, it's not. I don't see anybody. Can you see me or not?
We can say you've started screen sharing, but this is now probably your screen.
Okay. Not there. Okay.
No, so you might be able to minimize that window, just like.
I think you have to stop sharing that one.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah, I'm a newbie here, so.
No worries.
Okay. So, pause share. Shares, pause and share. All right, stop share. Okay, so I'm back here. Share screen, okay. Select a window application.
So then you should be able to select which program has the picture in it that you're looking to
Okay.
share.
No, that's what I just said. I don't see that picture, Jillian, that's all. Okay, bear with me here, okay. You just put up that original picture you had and I'll just.
Chat away?
through it.
Sure thing.
Yep. Okay, wow. Yep, just put that
All right.
original picture up. Okay, we'll work our way through it. Yeah, I guess you can see me in the corner.
Yep.
Anyway, okay. Welcome everybody to tonight's clinic right there. I can listen to Jeri all night long. She's a wealth of information, that's for sure. Hopefully I can add a little bit to that. I have shorn for a number of years. Loved it during the time I did it. I was a part-time shearer actually. Most shearers in our area in the Hudson Valley are part-time shearers. There are one or two over east that do shear full-time, and that is quite a task for sure. But anyway, going back, I think, I don't know what our group look like if you're shepherds or if you're just interested in learning about shearing right there. But the first question, if you are a shepherd, is how do I get my sheep shorn? Who do I call? What time of year do I shear? Jeri touched on some of these aspects right there. Anyway, there is a list of shepherds in the Dutchess County Sheep and Wool Growers website that lists some of the local shearers. And you can go there and start calling and see who might be available to shear your sheep. Jeri touched on different times of the year. Most of the shearing here in the Northeast occurs between February and June. We're kind of coming to the end of the shearing season for shearers right there because it just becomes too hot for the shearers and the animals. So most fellows or gals draw a line and say, we're not shearing in July and August right there. There are a few exceptions for show sheep, but generally that's done by the producers themselves right there. As we're going back and looking at shearing started way back as soon as they could get a couple of sharp stones together and start removing some of the wool from the early sheep back in the biblical times right there. And Jeri touched on the Jacobs right there, and they do go back. They're mentioned in the Bible right there, and probably one of the first sheep breeds that we've heard about. We're coming up, into the probably once into the 14th century or so right there. We started molding using metal, and the hand shears came into bearing right there. And I apologize for not having a full screen, but I'm just going to hold a pair up here. This is a pair of hand shears. They're still used by shearers today, believe it or not. Not only for demonstrations, but also for shearing sheep. And when you use a pair of hand shears like this, you shear a sheep differently than when you're using an electric machine right there. And I'll just pull up a couple right here that I have that I use. These are Leicesters. These have got a 3-inch head right there onto them. Generally used for small flocks at the shearer would shear. We get into some of the more exotic machines right here. These are finer blade machines right here. These are used for slick shearing animals, for fair, for show purposes right there. Not necessarily using to harvest your fleece. For me, we use all three right there. I use the Oster, the 3-inch head right there, but you'll see some of the shepherds and also some of the shearers. They've got the what we call the hand pieces or electric driven ones where you got a 1/2-inch motor. And going for those thick merino fleeces right there, the rambulets, you need some power. You're not going to use these little electric shears that I just showed you right there. With that dense fleece, you need some power to power your way through those fleeces. So let's come back and just kind of catch up a little bit right there. We've kind of gone through just some machinery right there, but we still come back to that question. You want to get your sheep shorn, okay? As a past shearer, people usually started calling somewhere in December or January to start setting up appointments for the upcoming year right there. And that hasn't changed any. There just is not a lot of choices as far as shearers in the Northeast right here. So the sooner you get on a shearer's list, the more apt you're able to get your sheep shorn in a timely fashion when you want those fleeces harvested right there. And there's certainly some considerations to take in. Jeri mentioned a little bit, about brewing right there. Well, also some of the other things that we see that affects those fleeces letting go is if your sheep have had a high temperature, they'll slip a fleece right there. And it looks just like brewing, but it's something a little bit different. And from there, once you get on a list, you're halfway home. The next thing is getting that shear to your property, to your flock, and actually getting the shearing process done. And some ways to help that shear get that accomplished is to have those sheep penned up. For me as a shearer, if I went to a person's farm or even backyard and those sheep are running around out in the field or they weren't penned up, I basically turned around and drove on to the next customer. My time was too valuable to be out in the field chasing sheep. And that's a number one rule that you as a producer should do, is have those sheep penned up, have them close confined and ready to go for the shear. That means taking them off feed for at least 12 hours, if not 24 hours before that shear shows up, and withholding water at least 12 hours beforehand. There's nothing worse than getting a sheep on the board and the sheep urinates on the board or passes a stool on the board, and you have to stop and remove that before it contaminates the fleece that you're working on at that point in time. So that's certainly very helpful to have those sheep confined and have their stomachs empty. They'll be more comfortable for that shear as he tips that sheep up and shears the animal right there. And another consideration is to have a nice clean area. So when you're pulling the sheep out, either he's bringing his plywood to shear on or you're supplying it. And certainly if you supply a piece or two of plywood, that helps him or her out in regards to setting up. That's one less thing they have to pull out of the truck or the van in their setup. So that's another helpful point for shepherds to take into consideration. Have a power cord there. Have power available. I've gone to several farms right there. I've got to bring a generator. And, the longer it takes to set up, the longer it takes the job to get done. And it just adds to the complexity of the process. So anything you can help to move the process along is very helpful. And I guess you as a shepherd, you also have to be watching that shear, okay? As he or she removes that fleece, you need to gather that fleece up. Either throw it on a table and skirt it at that time, or certainly set it aside on plastic or a canvas so you can skirt it later to take any contamination out that occurs, usually around the rectum and certainly the bellies. The shearer has already thrown that to the side, and same with the top knot. It'll take that off and that'll get thrown to the side because that has the most contamination in the entire fleece. So he'll do that for you, but you'll need to gather that fleece up, get it off to the side, and be ready to pull that next sheep out to him to help him just move along through the process. If you got one or two animals, it's not a big deal. But if you're looking at 50 or 60 sheep that need to be shorn right there, anything you can do to help him or her would be certainly appreciated at the end of the day. And it can be a long day. I don't think, unless you've actually shorn a sheep yourself, you cannot appreciate the effort it takes to shear one sheep. Jeri mentioned many different breeds, and certainly a shearer knows some of the easier ones to shear, and there's some of the more difficult ones right there. Some they have wool all the way up to the tip of their nose and all down their legs, and it just adds to the process of shearing. And other ones are very open-faced. Some have very little on their bellies right there, and you can glide right through them and shear a large number of sheep in a short period of time. So I just refer back that anything you can do to help the shear out would be beneficial. And I guess my one gripe that we run into over the years right there, as you're shearing along, you know, people are trying to talk to you, kind of get caught up, and that's all fine and good. But again, you just can't, you're trying to get that sheep shorn. You don't want any nicks. You don't want any second cuts in there. You want to harvest the fleece that's going to have a high value for that shepherd. So try not to talk to the shepherd or to the shearer until he's done shearing that sheep right there. And he may be ready for a break at that point in time. And just to move on, the other thing that I know different ones have asked me over the years, oh, can we trim the feet when you get done? Well, that's all fine and good, but again, you want to get the job done. You're there to shear sheep. You're not there to trim feet. And if you are, that just adds to the complexity of the job at hand right there. So just focus on one project at a time, and that's to remove that fleece and move on to the next animal right there. I guess it's easier for me to answer questions, but just to go on a little bit more about shearing right there. Myself personally, I will not shear a sheep within a month of lambing right there. I've had people call up and say, oh, gee whiz, you know, we're not lambing for another 2 weeks. And I'll back off for at least a month beforehand. I do not want to have any trouble with that ewe lambing later on, especially if they have multiple lambs. Those lambs are developing in that last month of time. And even though it's never been proven, but I've just thought in the back of my mind that I don't want those lambs getting twisted up with me rolling the ewe around late in pregnancy right there. So I'll draw the line on that. Even though I've sheared sheep and they've lambed right there on the board after I got done with them, and that's not something that I'll brag about, but I've done some favors for some people that way, and it's only a favor. And just in extreme cases, I would do something like that. But other than that, try to work your schedule out where either you're doing your shearing before lambing. Certainly that's going to be one of your better quality times for fleeces, or later on in the season after they've got some regrowth and you've got some length to that staple right there. And I think Jeri mentioned it, if not, but if you don't have an inch of wool, it's pretty tough to spin that wool right there. So just keep that in mind when you're looking at your animals and how much fleece they have onto them right there. A late fall shearing to get you through the winter certainly is a very good option. Shearers are not shearing that much at that point in time. The sheep are going into the barns and the sheds with a short fleece. They'll stay cleaner, they'll stay drier over those winter months. That's probably one drawback in the Northeast right here, and Jeri alluded to that as far as the humidity goes. Once we start shedding our sheep and putting them in barns right there, they're going on different types of bedding. That's when the contamination occurs in those fleeces, and certainly takes away some value from those fleeces. Personally, what we use in a Southdown barn right there, even though it's not a high quality fleece, but we do try to keep as clean as possible. We try to use either some virgin straw or long straw, what we call it right there. It cuts down on the small pieces embedding themselves in that fleece right there. And certainly some of the higher value fleeces, some of you might have gone by some farms where they've actually put canvas covers onto them. That protects them not only from contamination, but also from the weather elements and some of the effects that rain can have on fleeces. Sheep can rub on feeders and on the edge of the barn, and sometimes that with a little bit of moisture can create an awful lot of felt in the fleece right there. And that's probably one of the harder fleeces to get off if you're a shearer, if that fleece is felted. It's tough to get it off. You have to try to work your way under those felted fibers, and it takes a lot longer to shear a sheep. And normally to shear a sheep, it takes between 3 to 5 minutes to take the fleece off, depending on the sheep itself and the fleece. So that's kind of a rule of thumb is between 3 and 5 minutes right there if everything is going well. But after that, we've seen a lot of those breeds that Jerry mentioned before, and they all have their own challenges. Some are what we call double fleeced right there. It's a little more difficult to take off with a hand machine as compared to one of the stronger shaft machines right there. So it's good to notify your shearer, tell them what breeds of sheep that you have. So he or she comes prepared with the right equipment to take that fleece off. And I guess the other little thing that kind of sticks in a shearer's craw right there is when you call, always let them know the actual number of sheep that have to be shorn. If I can't even remember the number of times I've gone to a farm or I've gone to somebody's home and they called and said, oh yeah, I got only 5 sheep right there. And all of a sudden the flock has grown to maybe 10 or 12 or 15. It's amazing how nobody or very few shepherds know how many sheep they actually own right there until after the shear gets done and they've done the count right there. And the other little thing to notify your shepherd, your shepherd should notify your shear, is how many rams you have to shear. Rams are certainly can be a little more cantankerous than the ewes or even ewe lambs right there. They haven't been handled a lot. They might have horns, and all this kind of adds a little bit extra complexity to the job of getting those animals shorn. And certainly the worst thing that can happen is you've been shearing 25, 30 animals, and all of a sudden the shepherd says, oh, we forgot, I've got 5 rams in the back pen right here that need to be shorn. Well, I don't know about you, but certainly me, after I've done 25, 30 animals right there, I need a little bit of a break, and that's about the last thing I need to hear, that I got 5 big rams coming up after that right there. So anything you can do to make sure the shepherd is aware of, the shearer is aware of what's coming up, will be appreciated. And the other thing, don't be afraid to ask your shearer what he actually gets in regards to his fees for shearing. It's all over the board. A lot of it will depend on how far that shear is coming. If there's other flocks in the area that he can shear, that may get the cost of shearing down. But just off the cuff, to shear one sheep, it can cost between $5 and $10 a head. And that's just the basic charge. And then they may charge another flat fee for coming to your farm on top of that right there. So it's not really a cheap deal to get your sheep shorn. So if you're selling those fleeces, you want to make sure that he's removing them and there's no second cuts in there. So you've got a quality product after he leaves the farm right there. So you can go ahead and sell that to a hand spinner, to the wool pool or whatever, and hopefully make a little bit of money onto it. So anybody popping any questions up? Let's see here.
Yeah, thanks so much, Bruce. Now's your chance. Oh, shearing, yes. So we've got one question.
Yeah. Oh yeah, it's a lot different for sure. When you use the hand shears, generally that you'll position the sheep the same way. You'll take the top knot, that is the wool on the top of the head between the ears. That'll be the first thing removed. You'll take the belly wool off next, and that'll be tossed to the side. And then you'll basically start shearing from the head down. So, and you'll actually end up with the hand shears and doing the hind legs and around the rear end of the animal right there. Whereas with the electric shears, it's a little bit different. You'll actually shear the belly wool off, that's tossed to the side. You'll go down one hind leg, open that up. You'll come up, you'll open the neck up, open that up, and then come back down, open to one side, and you'll start to roll that off as you turn the sheep. And it'll still, everything comes off in one piece. Even if you do it with the hand shears, that fleece should come off in one piece. And if you got a real good shearer, he'll pick that fleece up and he'll throw that out onto your table right there, and you can go ahead and skirt. Anyway. So again, I see a question for shearing. All right, that's There are shearing schools available. Usually Cornell does one in March. Locally, we have not had a shearing school here in a good number of years right there because we haven't had a lot of people interested in doing it. Everybody says, oh yeah, I'd like to shear my sheep. That's all fine and good. But when it comes down to it, by the time they flip one sheep over and they have one nick on the sheep, that's the end of it. They throw their hands up and says, I'll hire the shearer to come and shear the sheep right there. But Cornell does have a shearing course. In the March frame, it's usually a day and a half up there when they're shearing their flock. The cost usually runs between $300 and $400 per person to do that. And that basically to cover if the damage done to the fleeces and also if there's any damage done to the animals. And don't be afraid to try shearing. My first school when we learned, I think I nicked probably the first 3 or 4 sheep, and it took a while after that for me to really eliminate the nicking on sheep. And it's not something you learn overnight, and you need to keep up with it. And it is a physical job to do that right there. So again, I guess the other thing that people they love shearing demonstrations. I don't do shearing demonstrations, but certainly if you want to come and see some sheep shorn, you can come to the festival, you can come to the Dutchess County Fair. It's probably one of the larger activities that draw a large crowd. People are always interested to see how fleece is removed from a sheep right there. We all see the discolored or uncolorful pictures we see on Facebook and some of the multimedia sites right there, but that's not the way that we shear sheep. That's for sure. We do take a lot of pride in our work, and we certainly want to give a product that the shepherd is going to be able to sell after we get done right there. So again, I would thank everybody. Got any questions, put them in the chat. We'll try to answer them as we go along right there.
I think there's one more question so far about which breeds do you think are the hardest to shear and which breeds do you feel like are the easiest to shear for you?
For me, the hardest ones were probably the Rambouillets and the Merinos right there. And that's mainly because the fleeces are very dense. Also, they do throw a few, not as much now, but the older Merinos used to throw quite a few wrinkles in the neck right there. So it took a little bit more time to get over those wrinkles without nicking them with a machine right there. Most of the meat breeds are pretty easy animals to shear right there. They're easy. They're open faced. They're very little bit leg wool, so it just speeds the process along right there if you have that. Yeah. Promos are another one. They're fairly dense fleece also. Yeah, so it's a little more challenging. You got to slow down. You just take your time and you get through them right there. Just one other thing, just to mention to folks, we've seen it in the springtime when everybody is ready to kick their sheep out. We all know feed costs are quite high, so they'll throw their sheep out on that early spring pasture right there. And a sheep's rumen hasn't adjusted to that yet there, so a lot of contamination can take place around the rectum, down those hind legs right there as they could get cases of diarrhea because the rumen just hasn't adjusted to the green grass right there. So if you have something like that, just be aware that you may want to bring those sheep in a couple of days earlier to get those the stool firmed up so it's not a mess on the board right there. And also you got to be concerned. We used to see fly strikes because of that, and certainly that's kind of an ugly thing to see when you're shearing. You run into a bunch of maggots around the tail head or even down the hind legs right there, and that'll certainly get the shepherd excited when you see something like that there. But again, a little common sense goes a long way in helping getting your sheep shorn.
Thank you so much, Bruce. We really appreciate that. And it's certainly a hard job, and you certainly make it look easy when you do it. So thank you so much for spending some time with us tonight.
Thank you.
Okay, let me do our next speaker. All right, so our next speaker is Marie-Paul Rossier. She follows a long tradition of knitting in amongst the women of her family and certainly has a special interest in natural fibers. She's worked extensively in many aspects of fiber production. She's volunteered during shearing season, alpaca farms, sheep farms, goat farms. Sorry about the dog. Sorry about that. She judges fleeces at a variety of events and as well as processes wool by hand, as well as commercially. And her work with all the different types of fibers has really the importance of using a fiber appropriate for what you want to create, what she wants to create. So in her talk now, she'll be covering some of the topics that you should consider when you're converting your wool to a more marketable product, like caring for your wool to enhance the quality of the fleeces, how to pick an end product suitable for the sheep that you are raising, and where and how to process small and large quantities of wool. So hold on for just a second. Marie, you can unmute yourself and I will load your screen. All right, you are welcome to chat as soon as you unmute yourself. Marie, you've got to click that unmute button on your menu. There you go.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
It's echoing though, so there might be another speaker on in the room. Go ahead now.
Yeah. So thank you for having me tonight.
Nope, hold on. Claire, you need to stop your speaker. Try that out.
Is it better?
No. I would just like potentially shut down all the other computers in that area.
Can you hear?
That's much better. That's perfect.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So thank you all for having me tonight. And the two speakers gave us such a wealth of information. So I hope I can add something to what they say. So for me, I have visited and helped shearing several times. And from growing just after shearing and how the sheep are cared for, especially the fine wool, for example. I've seen the sheep owner right after shearing, putting some blankets. I have one here on the slides. And as the sheep or the wool grows, they change the blankets. And that I've seen, it helps a lot to keep the fleece cleaned and to the next shearing. So usually whatever is outside the blanket has quite a lot of chaff and is quite dirty. but what is under the blanket is pretty clean. And also, as Bruce mentioned, it's good to have help when shearing is done. So you could have one person picking up the fleece from shearing and then throw it on a skirting table and remove all the VM and anything that you can, it's not appropriate to keep. For example, the leg around the neck, the belly wall, it can be put separately and used to around the farm for erosion, etc. But you will then have a very, very clean fleece. And I've seen myself removing tiny little VM, etc. when I even judge fleeces. So that helps. And then roll the fleeces, make sure they are kept in a bag in a clean area so there is no rodent going after or any moths coming to the wool before something is done with it. So then after that, what is good to do is decide what you want to do with your wool. In this area, we have a lot of shows where the shepherd can bring their wool to fairs and the Sheep and Wool Festival and any other wool show. So that at this time, if they have really nice fleece, they can win premiums. The fleeces are judged and they can make money just with the fleeces before they even do something with the wool, which is pretty interesting. And if it's a first prize fleece, it can be sold at this time and make quite a bit of money too. So, but to go back to the cleanness of the fleece, you can also help your shearer, which each time they finish shearing a sheep, you can quickly brush over on the board and having a spot very clean for the next sheep to be shorn. So then you can decide what you want to do with this wool. So would you like, Jillian, can you change the second slide for me? Yes, thank you. So if you'd like to then process the wool yourself, whichever fleece sheep you decide to breed, or maybe it could be one breed or several breeds, but you can either hand wash your wool or have somebody to scour for you. There are mills where you can ask to wash your wool or scour, and they will give you a wash and dry fleece, and then you can do whatever you would like to do with the wool. For example, you can, as you see on the first picture here, you can have it transform into roving. You can hand spin it. The third picture here is done at a mini mill. So it's if you have less quantity and you want to have each fleece processed separately, the mini mill can do that for you, which is a lot harder to have it done on a larger mill. So when you process your wool, you can also decide what kind of product or whatever you want to do with it. So you could, let's see, if you have Shetland, for example, or Merino, you might want to blend that wool with something else. For example, you could add some more hair on it. You could add some silk in it, and that would give you a very different product. So you could have a portion of your wool processed into just wool, and then another portion processed with adding alpaca, as I say, mohair or silk or any other hemp or whatever you would like. And then you have already within one fleece, if it's a larger sheep, different product to offer to the public or to you. You could use it to weave, you could use it to knit, to crochet, or felt. It's something that you can decide. So at this time, Jillian, can you change the next? Yes. So when you want to transform your wool, so on the first picture here, it's all hand spun. And then the second one, it's I dyed this product. So I had a minimal process this, and in the middle slide, the middle picture here has some silk in it and also some mohair. So it gives a shininess, and then the dye takes it differently. So you can see not a uniform color. So the other part is you can have just wool done like bats, and then you can felt. Here you have little sheep that have been felt. So it's for you to decide how you want to use your product. And if we can change to the next slide. Okay, so here are some products that I made with the wool I used. And the first slice here I added, so it's the gloves here are made out of naturally colored, although the Como sheep are white normally, but this is a mixed breed. So it's a natural color. And then I use some Angora rabbit that I raised, and I put like a little trim here to make a different product. And then the center slide, I have some Cormo also. And then the rest is some Shetland for the felt or other breed. And then the third picture is actually some commercial Shetland that I dyed and then knitted together. So in your area, you can find many ways to process your wool. There are several, as Jeri mentioned, there are several mills in our area. If you want to process a small portion of fleeces or wool, you can go to a mini mill, as I mentioned, and they will process that for you, fleece by fleece, and you can have some yarn done, you can have roving done, they will eventually dye it for you. And then, you know, depending on what is selling in your area, you can study the market and find yourself a niche. I've done a lot of hand spinning over the year and had sold at the sheep and wool, the farmers market. And I always managed to have no more yarn after the first day of the event. Everything was always gone. So a lot of ways to do things with your yarn, or to sell it, or to produce, or have somebody doing. You can also find somebody to make project for you, or to design a specific pattern, and then go and sell it as a kit. So somebody has any questions? Or
Thank you so much for that. Do you want to mention what mini mills you use?
yes, the mini mills, actually, I know the one that I use is closed, but there was there is one in Highland, I believe, the Noble Fiber Work, that opened not too long ago. And this, I understand, is quite good. I haven't given them anything right now. And otherwise, the larger mill, and there are some also in Maine. There is quite few. If you go and look for mini mill in the area, there are several. And then the larger processor, which I like about the mini mill, they will go ahead and process the wool very gently. They don't use a lot of chemical to wash, to scour the wool. However, if you send your wool to larger mill like Zeilinger in Michigan, etc., they carbonize the wool, and then they add to remove all the vegetable matter, etc. And then they will add more oil within the wool after it's processed. And also what I found is the mini mill, when they return your fleeces, the yield is a lot higher than you would get it with a larger mill. So I've got up to 80–85% back on a mini mill, but I would only get like 60% for a larger mill. For example, on 80 or 50 to 80 pounds of wool. So the yield was different. Also, the quality I found better. The material was better done on a mini mill than on the larger mill. So any questions?
Type in your questions. And maybe when you're judging fleeces at a show, what are you judging? What are you looking for? Is it just cleanliness, or is it fineness?
So usually they are the fleeces are put in categories. So the fine wool, the medium wool, and the as Jeri mentioned, there are so many kinds. The long wool, etc. So they are judged within their category. So I look mainly at the cleanliness of the fleece to make sure that there is no wool break, for example. So I do a test on several areas and make sure it's well skirted. This is also one of the main things, is the skirting. Make sure the fleece is dry and doesn't have a lot of vegetable matter. So these are the criteria to judge a fleece. And always I make comments, so for the next time, and I could see over the year improvement on the fleece I judge. For example, at the Sheep and Wool Festival or fairs, I could see over the year the improvement on all the fleeces.
Any other questions from anybody in the chat box? And last question from me is, do you want to just go a little bit into skirting, like for folks who might not know what the term skirting is, or what does skirting involve when
Oh,
you're doing it?
so skirting, if the farm has a skirting table, which is a large table, that you would throw a fleece, it's whatever is around the fleece when it's laid flat, you remove all the dirty part or where it has been cut. So all the legs, the neck area, and leave just the blanket. And sometimes it seems like a lot is taken away from it, but a smaller fleece that is clean and has no debris is worth a lot more than a bigger fleece that has a lot of debris. And a hand spinner will be quite picky on choosing their fleeces because it's a lot easy if they wash it at home or they process it themselves. It's a lot easier to process a fleece that is clean and doesn't have a lot of vegetation in it.
Perfect. Thank you. One last question from the crowd was, could you just repeat the name of that mini mill that you referenced? I just missed that.
Oh, it's Nobletown Fiber Works. And I think they advertise on Instagram too. They're pretty new, but they start to take in fleeces. And they've also done some yarn themselves. So I've seen some of the product and it looked really good to me.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for that. That was perfect.
But
I know everybody. Oh, go ahead.
thank you all for having me.
And I know that that was a lot to go over with everybody, but thank you all for joining. I appreciate everyone who showed up today, and hopefully you learned a little bit more. And again, we're going to be doing this again on a fairly regular basis. So we'll be having Zoom seminars every couple of months. We've got one slated for August on pastures and parasite management. We've got one for October on kind of what does it mean to be a sheep farmer? What does it entail? You know, what things you have to think about in the broader picture of things. And then December is a lambing management, going over some lambing details as well as confinement lambing versus pasture-based lambing. And we've got in-person workshops associated with each seminar. So those are a members only benefit. So join today. So tomorrow for our members, Carly Wilson will be showing some demonstrations on fleece skirting, some wool judging on, we've got a merino ram and a few Romney lambs coming in to show the differences between those two breeds and the wool of those breeds. And we've got some different fleeces from different breeds so that people can just touch and feel and see what the differences are and what you like about them and what you don't like about them, and how you want to include them in your sheep management stuff. So again, we've got that email address of Mary Drum on the right-hand corner for any feedback. If you like topics that we hadn't discussed, if you you know, hated something, be gentle. But you know, just we love feedback. We're not going to learn without you know, feedback on these lectures, and we want to make them helpful and applicable and practical. And we can't do that without some feedback. So feel free to send her an email with your information and questions. And again, if you missed contact or you want to be put into contact with any of the speakers tonight, just give her an email. But otherwise, thank you guys very much for coming. Really appreciate. And thank you to all our speakers.